All right, hello everyone. Today I am going to be starting a new series is w- where I am going to be explaining in depth all of the games I've made. For those of you who don't know, I made a couple of I made a couple of video games. I made a video showcasing it that should be releasing around the same time as this. But basically, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to explain it in depth. Now, here is a disclaimer. I am going to explain it and I'm going to try to make it sound simple. That doesn't mean that I can guarantee that you're going to understand it. I'm going to try to make it sound as simple as possible. So, let's get started. This might be a bit long because this is almost 300 lines of code, and this isn't even my longest code. But let's just get right into it. So, variables, score, that is the score. Jump equals false, that's to try to not get stuck on the platform. There's a reason why. I'll tell you about that in a few minutes when we get to that. Then there's lives. That's just, because this is the platform game I showed you. See, when you fall off screen. Now, it doesn't do that automatically. There's separate code for that. That just makes the variables. And then game run equals true. I just use that as a variable for, see, if you, I coded that to be that if you run out of lives, then game run is not true. And if game run is not true, then you get the game over screen. All right, so sprites. Player, create sprite 200, 200. That means the X and the Y on the grid. See, so that means the center, so that means the center of the sprite is going to be right here, right there. And then player set animation alien. I can't, that, that's this animation. That's this thing. That makes it look like what it looks like. Player scale 0.8, which means that normally, this is normally at its default, this thing is, the player is bigger, so I made it smaller. Set collider. That basically just means I messed around with the properties of its hitbox so that its hitbox doesn't have just default properties. So just I made its hitbox smaller than it would have been otherwise, so that its hitbox is like, reasonable. Alright, so platform, create sprite also at 200, 200. So the idea is that the alien kind of ends up in the platform, but the idea is supposed to be it ends up on the platform. And then set animation platform. That's this. Oh, and then platform Y. I didn't read that. Platform Y equals 235. So that's right below the alien. So you have a platform right below you when you start. And then platform velocity Y just means that's how many pixels per frame it's moving. And it's moving at 30 frames per second. So doing some quick math, that means it moves about 90 pixels a second. So that means, so if I show the grid, that means like if it starts at Y level 0, then it gets from there to right around here in 1 second. And that seems about accurate. Um, Platform 2, same as this, but it's a second platform and it has a random number. This one, platform one, is only right below the player so that the player doesn't start falling immediately. And then it's just the same for all of these, except for platform 5 and platform 6. Those are the two. First of all, they have visible set to false, which means you can't see them, and they don't have a velocity yet, and they're off screen. So basically, they're off screen, you can't see them. Those are the red platforms I was talking about, and So, coins. Coins, that's the animation. Um, and then collider circle. So it's in the shape of a circle so that, you know, the coins won't react to being touched unless you're actually like touching them. Because if it was a square, you can see why a circle with a square hitbox would be less accurate. And then it's slightly faster than the platforms and it's smaller than it normally is. And then same code for all the rest of the coins. Create edge sprites. Those are just default sprites. Those are just right around the edges. Because you see, so it makes a sprite off the edge. And then right uh, somewhere. Edge properties. Top edge. Oh, yeah. Uh, you can't change their Y or X position. That didn't work. I just forgot to take that out. But it collides with the top edge, left edge, and right edge, which just means that, it cannot magically go through it. And it just means without collision, sprites would just magically go through each other like you see in some glitches in video games. All right, and then there's if game run true, like I was mentioning, and then else, meaning if the variable game run does not equal true, then play the function game over. And game over, you see, that's all the drawing stuff required to make that screen. So you see, it changes the font to white up here, and it makes a black background. And then since it's an else function, nothing else happens because all the code for everything else to happen depends upon game run equaling true. So this draws this. Background black, fill red. That means, anything that you draw or write will be red until you change it. And then text size 50. Text game over 400 and 200. So that's what this is. Then white text size 20 and then score and lives. And then the score and lives there are lowercase and not in quotes because that's the variable. So basically you're telling it to show the variable. And then show score and lives, you see the text, it's gray, fill gray, text size 20, score lives. If lives equals 0, then game run false. If lives are less than or equal to 0, then game run equals false. You can see that's pretty simple. All right, background 1. See, so that's all this. So background dark blue, no stroke, and fill yellow. So that's the teeny dots in the background, and the moon would normally be a circle, but then there's fill dark blue, and it makes an ellipse right next to it. That makes it look like part of it is just the moon. That makes it look like part of it just isn't visible, and it's just the moon. And then background 2 is if score is greater than or equal to 25, then that, but with red and purple. Move player. If key down right, then player X equals player X plus 3. And set animation alien, and if left, then alien copy 2. So, you see that's how it turns. The set animation is how it turns. And then if key went down space, jump equals true, and then player velocity equals -4. The reason why I chose velocity instead of x equals x instead of y equals y plus 3 is because then you would need to hold down the space bar. Velocity continues after you let go of the space bar. You only have to just tap it, as you may hear me spamming the space bar. And normally it would just go flying off. But the reason why it's not is function fall. Player velocity equals player velocity y equals player velocity y plus 0.2. That means that very slowly it will be accelerating down. Because weird thing, y is actually down in this in JavaScript as one, despite what one may think. Platform properties. If platform y is greater than 450, meaning if it's like all the way down there, then it's programmed to go all the way up there, and then it'll just, it'll choose a random y so that the platforms get a little more spread out, and then 0 to 400, which just means it will appear anywhere, the center of it will appear anywhere on the screen, which is why sometimes you'll get it just sticking out the side of the screen. That's not a bug, that's just how I chose to make it. And you can see I made it to be so that uh, the random number is a wider range for some and a tighter range for others. That is just to further ensure that more randomness in the pattern of the platforms. If player y is less than platform y, then stop fall state and player collide with platform. Basically, the reason why I added less than platform y is basically just so you can go up. You won't collide with it if you go up through it, but then when you land on it, you will. And then stop fall state is jump equals false if jump equals false, then player velocity equals 0. That's why I added jump equals false, because the idea is that you set your velocity to move you set your velocity, you jump by changing the velocity, but the issue is that sometimes you can't move away from the platform. You can't get out of the platform's hitbox X long enough. The velocity won't affect you fast enough to get out of the platform's hitbox. So the platform will then set you to 0, set your velocity to 0. And then the multiple fall states is just for each individual platform because it's hard to program something that will work for all platforms. And I probably could just combine that into one function, but And then platform red properties, same pattern. It's just that the player will always collide with them no matter where they are. and score 50. If score 50, then platform 5 and 6 visible equals true, and it sets their velocity. So basically what that means is now that you have gotten far enough for them to activate, you can now see them and they will now start moving. And then fall state 5 and 6, same thing. Same thing as the other fall states. Coin properties is, that's just the coin movement. If players touching coin, score equals score plus 1, and then coin loops. So basically, the coin comes back to the top. So basically, the coin does its loop. It's just that by collecting the coin, the player has forced the coin to loop rather than waiting for it to go to the bottom and come back up again. Ah, darn it. I think I may have accidentally glitched through the bottom of the red one. Oh well. Yeah. So I lost, and then I already showed you all this. So yeah, basically, and then the function draw is basically just this repeats forever and nothing else happens. Everything after this would normally not happen, except this stuff works because that just creates the functions. It's not telling it to do anything. This is where these functions are being used. They're just down here for organizational purposes. So basically, in conclusion, score, health, a couple other invisible variables makes the sprites, you know, backgrounds, controls, gravity, um, obstacles, score things, barriers, scoreboard, and game over screen. Oh, and draw sprites. It's what it sounds like. Draw sprites. And the reason why we need to put the background in the draw loop is because if you take the background out of the draw loop, basically the previous it draws the sprites every single frame. So if we didn't, then it would look like this. Then the other frames of the sprite would not disappear. So you need to have the background in the loop. So then it will draw the background over the previous frames. It will draw the fresh background over the previous frames before it draws the sprite again. So, yeah, that's this game. I'll try to do another one of these soon. But yeah, that's all for now. Bye.